Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with Dr. Larry O'Hara, and we're talking about the many things going on over there in the UK and his publication, Notes from the Borderland, borderland.co.uk. And I want to thank you, Dr. O'Hara, because my screw-up last night with the scheduling. Thank you so much. I want the audience to know what a kind man and a gentleman Mr. O'Hara is, Dr. O'Hara. I had scheduled. We were supposed to take this last night, and it's 1 a.m. over there in the UK. But obviously 1 a.m. would be Wednesday, not Tuesday, for everyone else. But I kind of got a little confused there. And I left our friend here hanging last night, but he came back for us today. So thank you so much, Dr. O'Hara. Now, Tommy Robinson, what can you tell us what's going on? I'm not very familiar with this guy, and from what I understand, you're not allowed to do that over there, right? In England, you cannot stand in front of a courtroom as the defendants are walking in declaring that they're guilty, and he was arrested for that. Am I getting this correct?
Yeah, I mean, I've not followed it totally, but I've followed it in some detail.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's a legal aspect and there's the political aspect. As I understand it, the case that he was commenting on was one that the judge had previously issued an order that prohibited reporting from it. And I suppose that is the question. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that he's broken the law in terms of contempt of court. I think the bigger question to step back from is to say, well, why did the judge issue that order in the first place? Now, there's two possible reasons, both of which are plausible. The first reason is the judge might have issued that report, restriction on reporting, in order to prevent a trial being prejudiced. But the other possible reason is the judge might have issued the restriction on reporting to prevent the trial being reported on because of the nature of the trial. And of course, that's where you've got law and politics meet, because although Robinson, I mean, if I would just contrast it with the trial that's going on now, just at this moment, of National Action members, the alleged, should I say, there are 6 neo-Nazis who are on trial currently, charged of membership of a banned group, neo-Nazi group called National Action. Now, one of them has admitted to, pleaded guilty to buying a machete in order to attack a Labour MP. Now, that has been all over the papers today, with a picture of the machete and him pleading guilty, and yet the trial is still going on of him and the 5 others of being members of this group, National Action. Now, some people might say, by highlighting in some detail that he's pleaded guilty to this case, that probably won't improve the standing of him or the others in the eyes of the jury, for example, really. And yet that reporting is allowed. So I suppose the reason why Tommy Robinson is seen as a bit of he wrote a very interesting book called Enemy of the State, if I recall, which as I've mentioned, which is how he came up, was the first person I'd ever seen who'd mentioned the Metropolitan Intelligence Bureau, and he'd mentioned it in fact, he recounts in the book where he says to my lawyer, who are these people? And nobody could tell him. Well, if you read our magazine, I don't know whether he has, but he might now have time to, as he's in jail. If you read our magazine, he'd find out who they were. So there's a political question about why there was the reporting restriction, and then there's the narrow legal question that it would appear that he did. The judge told him not to report, and he did. And I suppose the question is what the objection against him to. It's probably the reason why the reporting restriction was imposed, is because the nature of what he has to say about the crimes and about the accused is not something that the mainstream media wants to be broadcast. And I think because it felt it would harm race relations, and I think that's why the orders have been issued against him.
And the nature of the crime was that these were Muslim immigrants that were involved in rapes?
Well, it's all allegations, of course,
right.
And of course many of them may well have been born in the UK, but yeah, involving in sexual grooming of young girls. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
And is it common over there in England? Because over here we're not allowed to report on the names of a victim of sexual abuse, or like a raped victim. You wouldn't be allowed to report their name. But is it common to have gag orders? We call it a gag order here.
I mean, I don't think he was mentioning the names of victims. I could be wrong. I don't think he was.
Okay.
I think it's what it's felt is there have been a number of scandals in various towns of sexual abuse of this kind of pattern. And I think the authorities are worried that if that knowledge of that pattern becomes widespread, then that might inflame racial tension. And of course, the counter-argument might be that, you know, the real issue is what's happened to these young girls. That, you know, are they is what's happened to them, allegedly, is that less important than maintaining good race relations? You know, that's a difficult question.
Right.
I think from the girl's point of view, I think we know what the answer might be.
Now, I really enjoyed our interview, and in the pre-interview you mentioned that you've done some reporting on the murder or the death of Princess Diana. It's one of the most popular shows I ever did was the death of Princess Diana, and I had this gentleman on who I guess he had COPD, was at the end of his life. He had a heart coughing a lot. Very hard to hear him. So I do want to do a show on that again in the future. I'd like to invite you back for that. So we can go into it in depth, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. The only thing is, you know, having looked at it, we wrote about it briefly in 2003, I think. Our current view is that certainly Diana was, you know, under observation by the security services and so on, and it was definitely what you might call a, you know, information cleanup organisation organised by MI5. But I have yet to be convinced that it was murder. It could have been. There's evidence to show it could have been. But I think there's a good Scottish verdict in the Scottish legal system, when instead of just having the two binary opposites of innocent or guilty, the Scottish they have a third one of not proven.
Right.
And I think that's the camp where I'm in at present. But it's interesting that every now and then you get a flurry of stories about that issue. It is a fascinating case, but I think I'm in the not proven camp at the moment, which of course is one of the reasons why we're probably infuriating to people who can who think when we come to investigate an issue, we don't know in advance exactly what our conclusion's going to be because we look at the evidence. You know, that's the way it goes.
Right, and it's so important too that as you're investigating something, if your first theory or the first bits of information you found out turn out to be wrong, you have to make a U-turn and go back, and not keep trying to prove it's right. You know, you can't keep going.
That's right. A lot of it, like I mean, some of the stuff I've read on Princess Diana is like Looney Tunes stuff, you know about. But you know, there's lots of interesting, fascinating stuff. You know, it is a whole really fertile area, which we will probably return to in the magazine at some point, just to show that we do cover some things that other people are covering. It's just that we'll cover it in our own way.
Now, you mentioned also, too, that you have covered ufology, UFOs, and we don't cover that at all here on this show, but I'd be interested in what you've come up with.
Well, strange to say, the reason why I covered ufology, it probably fits with the idea that truth, or with the reality that truth is stranger than fiction, is that in the early 1990s, we tracked an agent provocateur who's called Tim Heppel, and I wrote a kind of trilogy of publication about him, and he simultaneously infiltrated right-wing groups and green groups and anarchist groups, and he tried to encourage the anarchist groups to set up armed cells and all this kind of stuff. And because I was aware that he was also simultaneously involved in the right as well, one of the groups he was trying to entrap, called Green Anarchist, I contacted them and I said, do you know who this person is? If I were you, I'd be very wary of doing such and such. This is how you should proceed. And I told them to get him to communicate by letter. And so he very kindly sent a load of handwritten letters really incriminating himself, showing he was an agent provocateur. And he did some really complicated things about passing hit lists of left-wing targets to right-wing people and right-wing targets to left-wing people. And the reason why I got into ufology is after I exposed him, he was working for this MI5 front magazine, Searchlight. After I exposed him in two pamphlets he had a pamphlet called At War with Society, and I produced a counter called At War with the Truth. And what he did is he disappeared. And then, about 6 years later, after I'd written about him, he resurfaced using a different name, Tim Matthews, in the ufology movement. He even had a book published called UFO Relation, which he was urging ufologists to, invade military bases and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, he's trying the same stunts in this area as he was in others. So although it's not something I have a huge interest in, you go where the evidence is. So we immersed ourselves in the world of ufology and looked at all the different theories about the alien hypothesis, the military hypothesis, the ley line hypothesis, all these different things, and became fascinated by it. And we exposed him again, and then he disappeared from that angle. I don't know what he's going to be into next. Maybe seances, who knows? I don't know.
It does seem like there's a lot in the UFO proponents, like the ones who like attract a lot of media attention to themselves and do interviews and host shows. It does appear that there's a lot of charlatanism, not just charlatanism though, but also like some kind of a skullduggery. That there's some kind of intelligence manipulation of that group as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to say, well, what do I think is the most common explanation for UFOs that is most plausible? I'd probably fall on the line of it's the military hypothesis. They're probably military aircraft being tested that they don't want to talk about. I remember once when I was in the US and I was in the Nevada desert when they were developing, I can't quite remember was it stealth aircraft? Yeah. Sure. And I was with an American lady, and I was half thinking of photographing it from the ground. She said, "Oh no, you can't do that. Oh no, you'll be in real trouble if you do that." So maybe I like, but certainly the thing is, a lot of people are looking for meaning. I think it's why people get involved in fringe political groups and some fringe religious groups. People are looking for meaning in their life, about getting a kind of secret knowledge and power that nobody else understands. And of course, modern day belief in aliens has probably replaced what was in the Middle Ages a belief in witches and demons. There does seem to be an interesting parallel.
It seems like more people have or less people have faith in God, or religious faith, than have these other bizarre theories or involved in all these.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the writer G.K. Chesterton who said the more people say they don't believe in anything, the more they believe in everything. So in other words, they have no means, no crap filter to actually distinguish between what is valid and what isn't valid. And that's of course where the internet can encourage that. It can, people can get into self-enclosed hermetic communities that can then incubate strange ideological viruses at terrifying speed.
And it's so easy to produce a meme with a picture and a quote, and have it go viral and be repeated, and just people just accept it as fact. And